One major exchange CEO suspected trouble at FTX over 6 months ago. CME Group CEO Terry Duffy says he told FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried to face, quote, to his face, I should say, "You're a fraud. You're an absolute fraud." That was back in March during a meeting with him. Duffy recounted this conversation just days ago with Guy and Dan for their podcast On the Tape. Terry Duffy is here now to take us deeper into that encounter. Terry, this is absolutely fascinating, and what we're finding out now is no surprise to you months ago. How long did it take you to figure out that this guy was a fraud?
Well, Melissa, I don't know if I knew he was a fraud right away. I just didn't, know what his business was. Here he is. He's trading an inefficient arbitrage out of Hong Kong, making all this money supposedly. And the next thing I know, he's going to buy CME, he's going to buy Goldman Sachs and everybody else. He's making all these different allegations of what he wants to do. So I met him, as you said, when I gave Guy and Dan the podcast the other day. But what is really interesting is how this whole thing came about, which kind of got my interest up about he is a fraud. And I met earlier in the day with the head of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and I asked, why are you not dismissing this application out of hand? And he said, because under Section 5B of the Commodity Exchange Act, which calls for innovation, he has to look at it. And I said to him, I said, you don't have to, under the Commodity Exchange Act, have to accept anything that's innovation that puts risk management at the back seat of this. And that's exactly what was going on. So right away, my suspicions were up. Why is there so much pressure coming for this application? Then when I met with him, I knew right away, I said, this is a joke. This is absolutely going nowhere. And then you look who he's traveling with. He's traveling with Mark Wiegand, the former chairman of the CFTC. Now, what was Mark doing for him? I have no idea. Was it credibility or just carrying his briefcase, or I should say his backpack? And then he's got Ryan Miller. Ryan Miller is the former counsel at the CFTC and became general counsel of the CFTC. And this guy's sitting at a bar, could barely pick his head up, saying to me, why won't you let us grow? I said, he said he's worth $26 billion. I'm assuming you've been growing pretty good here. So you could see there was so many different red flags. And then when I got to Washington, you're looking at people like Mike Conway, former head of the ad committee, who was an FTX lobbyist. And I heard all these different things coming out of members of Congress. Were they putting pressure on the CFTC? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, there's a hearing come December 1st, and I hope someone has the courage to ask, was anybody putting pressure on the CFTC to move forward with an application that could have put everything at risk? And Melissa, let me say one more thing, which I think is really important. I told my team this had nothing to do with crypto. What he wanted to do was he wanted to list all asset classes, mine, the intercontinental exchanges, and everybody else's, under his model, which would have been, as I said, a biblical disaster.
Is it your allegation, Terry, that, for lack of a better term, that he had lawmakers in his pocket? I mean, looking back on it, he was a major donor in the midterms. No, you're not saying that, because, to put pressure on the CFTC is coming from someplace.
$40 million, second largest donor. I want to know where the money came from, and that's what you'd be asking. Is that customers' money or was it his? Is the $16 million house that his parents are living in, is that customer money or did he make that? Where's all this money coming from? All the people, the 10 people living in a $40 million condo. Whose money is that? Whose money were they spending? Unsuspecting clients commingling the funds? I don't know the answer to that. So I think a lot of questions need to be answered. But I did say in Congress, Melissa, right after UST collapsed and it lost 85%. I said his proposal will do the exact same thing. I didn't know how right I would be in a very short period of time.
You got reprimanded for your testimony in front of Congress.
I did. Yeah, I got reprimanded by a guy that didn't have the courage to show up, but he had to come on a Zoom, named Ro Khan out of California, telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. I don't think Mr. Khan has a clue what he's talking about. So I'm prepared to debate him at all costs or at any time. But, I don't appreciate that because he told me I was under oath, and he said that they do have capital. I said they do not have. They have capital under regulatory regime, but they don't have margin capital, which I'm holding an additional $200 billion that they don't. That's the capital I was referring to. He was not quite quick enough to understand that.
When you take a look back, Terry, at this whole thing, are you surprised by how many people got taken for this ride that Sam Bankman-Fried created, whether it be the investors in this thing, whether it be lawmakers, regulators, you name it?
No, I'm not. No. When you have the greatest quarterback of all time and the supermodel wife doing a commercial, picking up the phone saying, "Are you in? Are you in? Are you in?" To me, it looks like a pump and dump scheme if you watch that commercial, and I watched it again today. People get very influenced by people like Tom and his wife and others, or his ex-wife. So, no, I'm not surprised. And I'm not surprised by the baggy shorts and the big T-shirt, because it's a gimmick. And most people that wear a gimmick are also selling a gimmick.
Terry, it's always great to get your take on things, especially from where you sit at the CME. Do you think every single regulatory agency should be ashamed of themselves at this point, whether it be the CFTC, whether it be the SEC? It seems like everybody fell asleep at the wheel.
You know, Melissa, I'll say this. It's too early to make those comments. There's going to be a lot of hearings going on in the future. Let's follow the money. Let's see who knew what, when, and where, and then we'll draw those conclusions then.
All right. Well, we always like to talk to you, Terry. Always enjoy it.
Thanks,
We know
Melissa.
you're a fan of the show and you watch every single night. We get emails randomly from you every single night.
You don't have you don't have a dummy on tonight, do you? He's not on.
Right here.
Oh, you're right there. Sorry, buddy.
It's all right.
And if we do get Ro Khanna, we hope you'll come back, because that should be an interesting
I'd love
exchange.
to. I would love
I want to hear
to come
what
on with
the
Ro
congressman
Khanna.
has to say for himself. I'm
Yeah,
missing that
I'd love
one.
to talk to the congressman myself.
Terry, thank you. Terry Duffy. All right, so he sniffed it out early.
Well, and he talked about, though, a collection of people around SBF that sent the signal that there was at least people that could help prime the pump of the system. But what I think is also interesting to hear Terry talk about is how, first of all, he's very much in favor of trading digital assets, and that, I think that his quote is something like, one bad apple doesn't spoil the bunch. And if anything, it really is the time for the real exchanges to step up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, which dart to pick up? What was interesting to me is that, from my understanding, is that Terry actually offered to help with risk management of this whole operation and was rebuffed quite profusely. And I think I was waiting for that. That is a red flag of all red flags. When you have someone that's so proficient at doing that, you're talking about the CME here, and you are looking to circumvent what is a tried and true situation when it comes to risk management. I think that was very telling.
Full disclosure, I mean, Terry's a friend. I've known Terry since the late 1980s, just so we understand. He watches the show. CME is a sponsor of our podcast. With all that said, Ro Khanna said to him, "Sir, you don't know much about cryptocurrencies. You're opining about cryptocurrency, and you're giving false statements to Congress." That's patently false. He was telling Congress the truth. This is the same Terry Duffy, by the way, that sniffed out John Corzine many years ago and warned people about them. So at some point, some of these geniuses should start listening to Terry Duffy instead of being, I want to say a word that I won't use, but instead of being rude to him.
Glib.
Well,
Guy and I were having this conversation with Terry. We were being recorded. We almost kind of fell off our seats when he's telling us this, okay? But here's the thing. And people will say, well, why didn't he say anything? He did. He went to Congress 2 months later. And I'm going to read from his testimony what he said. He said, FTX proposal is glaringly deficient and poses significant risk to market stability and market participants. That was in May of this year. I mean, he laid it all out. And if you didn't like the back and forth with him and Ro Khanna, you could have read this testimony ahead of time, and it was all there. So, again, kudos to Terry.